Hello and welcome to another Nightgeist Gaming video. Today I'm excited to do a combat deep dive and wanted to feature one of our units that I feel that is underutilized for a lot of people, and many are not getting the full capacity out of this set of units, this combination of units I should say, and I wanted to highlight them in this video. So if you like Harlequins, if you are interested in using the Troupe and Troupe Master, then this video is for you. I'm also going into how to use this combination in some different ways and get some of the maximum benefit of the fight phase so that you can maximize the ability of your Troupe and Troupe Master to deal with all sorts of different kinds of units in different situations, such as getting around fights first or getting into a target that's further away than you would normally be able to charge. So this unit has a lot of flexibility and a lot of ability to get to things that sometimes people won't expect, and I just wanted to kind of highlight that. So let's dive in, take a look at this unit real quick, and then get into the combat techniques. So in this video, we're going to be going over the unit stats and information real quickly. We're going to talk about their damage and efficiency into a lot of different kinds of targets and their kind of favored targets. And then once we go through all that, we'll go into the combat techniques. And the meat of the video is going to be the combat techniques. That's mostly what this is about. But I thought it'd be nice to also highlight a specific unit while talking about combat techniques. Now, these combat techniques are not completely just for the Harlequins. You can use these in a lot of different ways, regardless of the detachment you're playing, and even regardless of whether you're playing Eldari or not. But I did want to highlight it with Eldari units and talk about some of the cool little tricks we can do with the Harlequins. Starting with the Troupe Master, we're just going to review his data real quickly. This is basically the data sheet for the Troupe Master. I'm not going to go into all the details. We can see the stat line here. The important thing is you want to take the fusion pistol and the Troupe Master's blade. Troupe Master's blade has that nice strength and AP damage 2, and since the Troupe Master is hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s to hit with those 5 attacks and everything's dev wounds, it's a pretty nice profile. He actually hits pretty hard into a lot of targets. Now what he brings to the unit that's pretty neat is the Choreographer of War ability, which allows him to pile in and consolidate 6 inches. And yes, we do have that as a battle focus token, but the fact that we can do this with the unit without needing to use a battle focus token can actually be really important, because it will free up one of our tokens to use elsewhere if we need to fade back or something along those lines. So it's basically like having that battle focus token for free. But on top of that, we can also end as close as possible to the nearest unit, not just the closest model. And that actually opens up some very niche situations where you can actually get the troop into a better position and also make sure they all get to attack and can't be messed up quite as much as some other units where they have to go to the closest model. He also has Segrek's Favor, which allows him to get the reroll hit rolls of 1 and have +1 to wound in melee. So he already has built in basically some of the abilities that the troop brings, and so regardless of what you pick with the troop, he will always at least get those things. And so there's a little bit of redundancy with him, but it's just really nice for him to be hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s, and always have that +1 to wound. Strength 5 is a great place to be with +1 to wound, because you're now wounding Terminators on 3s, you're wounding Marines on 2s. It's a very nice breakpoint to have as far as strength is concerned when you have +1 to wound built in. And let's take a quick look at the troop themselves. You can see that the troop have, again, the basic stat line of the Harlequins. We're going to be taking as many fusion pistols as we can, and then also neurodisruptors, and you'll have 1 shuriken pistol. The lead player will take a power sword, and on the rest, you want the Harlequins blades. Now, there's a little bit of a debate on Harlequins blades versus special weapons, but it's not much of one, because when you look at the math behind everything, the blades are better into almost every single target with a very select few exceptions, and those exceptions are very small as far as the difference on average damage. You're going to get much more consistency and much better average damage out of the Harlequin's blade into basically any target in the game, so just default to those. That makes it really easy as well. You don't have to think about different profiles or maybe bringing different kinds of troop for different opponents. Just stick with the Harlequin's blades. Now the ability of the troop is Dance of Death. At the start of the fight, you get to choose an ability for the unit to gain until the end of the phase. Now this will be the fight phase only, And so you'll pick between the three: Hero's Prowess, Villain's Doom, and Trickster's Grace. Basically just mean reroll hit rolls of 1, +1 to wound, or -1 to hit against the units targeting this unit. And again, that's specifically in the fight phase. Almost all the time we are going to be picking +1 to wound. That is almost always the best way to get the most value out of the troop. There are a few exceptions, and basically the exceptions are going to be that if Eldrad is able to apply the +1 to wound, then obviously we would go to the reroll hit rolls of 1 to boost our damage, since we already have the +1 to wound, and you can't get +2 to wound unless, of course, your opponent has some sort of -1 to wound to counteract it. Now, Trickster's Grace, the -1 to hit, is really nice for when the troop get charged. So a lot of times, if your troop end up getting stuck out, or the Starweaver has been destroyed and now they're just sitting there on foot and something charges them, you can make them -1 to hit, which actually gives them a really nice buff and durability in melee, and can sometimes surprise people how much they will stay alive between their -1 to hit and then also their 4-up invulns. Even though they are easy to wound, it's amazing sometimes how much that -1 to hit on top of their 4-up invulns actually allows this unit to survive things that people don't expect them to survive. Don't get me wrong, it's still a glass cannon unit, it's still very easy to take out, especially with high volume attacks, but it's really nice to have the flexibility based on the situation that the troop have between these three abilities. So with that in mind, let's move forward and take a look at some of the math behind this unit. So for average damage, I am going to look at this with them being able to shoot all of their pistols and then also be able to charge and fight. So that is important because the pistols actually do bring a good little chunk of damage between the 3 fusion pistols that you'll have, 2 Neo Disruptors, and the Shuriken pistol. And between all of that, that actually adds a good little bit of damage, probably 20-ish%, maybe 30% of the damage that they do is actually coming from those pistols. So make sure that you are trying to get those pistols in range to use whenever possible. But if you are able to get the pistols and then charge and fight, you're looking at 18 damage on average to Guard, 12 into Eldar, 16 into Marines. And the reason that that number actually goes up is because since the Eldar are generally 1 wound, the Troupe Master's 2 damage gets kind of wasted, but it is not wasted against the Marines, and that's why the Marine damage is actually higher than the Eldar damage, even though you would probably think otherwise. Now into the Orc Boys, we're only getting 11, but that's assuming that they have the 5-up invuln from the Wah. If they don't have that 5-up invuln, then you'll get many more kills against the boys than that number. But I did want to have that in there with them having the 5-up invuln because it is something you're going to run into on the go turns and want to have a good idea of how many of the Orc Boys you're going to be able to take out in one activation with the troop squad. Into Terminators, you'll see they actually do 10 damage on average. Nemesis Dread Knights 10, Doomsday Arcs 9, Predators 10, Vindicators 9, and then Tranifex 9. And what's kind of interesting that you'll see here is that it's a very consistent approximately 10 damage with a few different situations making things a little bit different based on the toughness or some of the saves of what you're going into, but you're looking at 9 or 10 damage into almost any target in the game, and then of course a bit better damage into some of the infantry. And this brings a level of consistency that we don't really see in many of our other units, and it's through the volume of attacks, and of course the number of devastating wounds that you do will make this number go up or down, and there's some variability in here, of course, because of the dice, but it is still going to be, on average, a very consistent attacking unit. And that puts it in a very unique spot when it comes to Eldari, because a lot of our units are specialist and tend to really thrive at attacking one type of target. But if you look at the damage that the Troupe and Troupe Master are doing across the board here, all this damage is extremely efficient. And let's take a look at our ROPI, or the return on points invested, to get a good idea of how well the Troupe and Troupe Master do when it comes to efficiency. So as you can see, against the Guardian equivalents here, we got 61%, which is actually in the low end, and the Eldar 117, Marine equivalents 69, so about 70%. The Orc Boys is a bit low, but again, this is during the wall. You're going to have a lot better experience killing more Orc Boys when they are not having their 5-up invuln, of course, but that's always true against the orcs. Against Terminators, we're at 76%, Nemesis Dread Knights 100%, Doomsday Arc 81, Predator 77, a Vindicator 89%, and a Tranifex 67. So we're really floating between 60 and 90 to 100% depending on the target, pretty much into everything across the board. And it's really interesting to see that, and I think it brings this unit into a special place where it doesn't really matter what your opponent is skewed into or what you run into. You can kind of rest easy knowing that the Troupe and Troupe Master are going to do good damage into any target. These numbers are your return on investment. And so this means that if you get the Troupe to shoot and charge and fight a Nemesis Dread Knight, for example, they're going to do enough damage to that Nemesis Dread Knight that they have gotten their value in that one set of attacks. So between shooting and fighting, they'll have done enough damage to the Nemesis Dread Knight to actually have met their own value when it comes to how many points you spent on them compared to how many points your opponent spent on their unit. Not many units are able to get 100% of their value in one activation. And it's a really nice thing to be able to do when you know these kind of targets that they excel into and get their value out of really well. And in general, as you can kind of see here, it's going to be things that have invuln saves. So we have pretty good efficiency into the Terminators, 76%, Nemesis Dread Knight, 100%, Doomsday Arc, 81%. We're cutting through their invuln saves very efficiently with the devastating wounds and the number of attacks that we get. Now, when you consider that you can also throw grenades with this unit before they shoot and then charge and fight, that adds a whole nother layer where they can actually get a lot of value, and if you spend this 1 CP on them, they often will do more damage to almost any unit as far as points value of damage than they cost you in pretty much every situation. You are going to be doing more than 160 points of damage into almost anything that you attack with this unit between grenading, shooting, and fighting. And there aren't very many units that can say that into such a wide variety of units. Now, of course, things like fire dragons can boast that against vehicles and monsters. It's very rare for units to hit that target of 100% value in one turn. And do it into so many different types of units is really what I want to emphasize here. I really like using this unit as kind of a flex unit to give me a little bit of ability to go into anything that the opponent puts on the board. So let's take a quick review of the analysis of this. The damage and efficiency is very consistent at taking out basic units of infantry, and some of the breakpoints that they get to is very nice. So if there's a 10-man Guardsman squad, maybe even if they have a leader, we're averaging 17 damage, so we're easily cleaning that up. 5 to 10 Eldar, we're doing 12 damage on average, so we can clear up even 10-man Eldari bricks. 5 Gene Stealers, we're doing 16 damage on average, so we comfortably take out all 5 Gene Stealers. 5 Space Marines, we'd have 10 wounds, but we're doing 15 damage on average. 10 Orc Boys, we're doing 11 on average, and 3 8-bound, which would end up having 9 wounds, we're doing 11 damage. So you can look at all those different things and all those type of infantry, and we're cleanly dealing with all those units completely 100 to 0. And hitting those breakpoints is just really useful because it allows us to actually take a full unit off the board and not let them hit the Troupe back, which is exactly what we want to do because the Troupe can get back in the Starweaver. So if the Troupe move forward and shoot and charge and fight and do all the different things that they are able to apply damage with, and they completely wipe out the unit at the end of the fight phase, our Troupe and Troupe Master get back in the Starweaver. So knowing that we can cleanly take out units is an important metric to kind of consider and then breakpoints to think about when deciding how to use this unit efficiently. Now, they can take out bigger units and are even effective into things like Terminators, like I mentioned, with grenades. So between all the different damage they can do, grenades, shooting, charge, and fighting, they can take out 4 Terminators and even 3 Alaris pretty comfortably. They also can take out Predators, Vindicators, and War Dogs even. Most opponents don't expect that. They don't really look at the Troupe and Troupe Master and think, oh, my Predator is in danger, my Vindicator might get taken out. But between grenades and those fusion pistols, and then charging in and getting those dev wounds, they can very comfortably take out Vindicators a pretty good percentage of the time. The Rapi efficiency and again, that's return on points invested, is over 50% against almost all targets, and generally sits between 70% and 100%, which is a very, very good efficiency number for a unit. And that goes for any unit. The Eldari have Specialist, and the Troupe and Troupe Master unit is really one of our few units that is, in a sense, a generalist and can really go into any target. The damage reduction means little against them because most of their damage is 1. So when you go into units that have -1 damage or have damage, yes, it'll affect the Troupe Master's damage, but it won't really do anything to the Troupe itself. And since the Troupe is carrying a good portion of the damage being done, that means that damage reduction is going to do less to this unit combination than it does against many others. The Starweaver support also helps take out just enough more models. So if we're trying to get to take out 10 Space Marines, we can use the Starweaver's cannons, and we can throw grenades and shoot and charge, and we can take out 10 Space Marines on average by combining this whole package together, which would be the Troupe Master and Troupe inside of a Starweaver. So again, a really nice breakpoint to be able to hit. It's of course not guaranteed. If you go into a 10-man Space Marine brick, don't expect that every single time you do, you're just guaranteed to take them out. But on average, you will. And so most of the time, you actually will take it out. And even if you don't, you'll take out so many of the Space Marines that in general, they're not going to be able to hit the Troupe back hard enough to actually make them take too much damage on the return hit. Unless, of course, there's some kind of leader leading that unit, but in general, I just wanted to put out there that that breakpoint of 10 Space Marines can actually be hit pretty regularly. Okay, so now that we've talked about the Troupe and Troupe Master and the general package, I want to get right into combat techniques. And this is the main portion of the video, what I really wanted to focus on, and I really want to help players do better in the combat phase. What I've noticed after coaching multiple different people is that since we are a shooty army, as people are learning the game, they get better and better at looking at angles to take shots with Eldari, but they still have a lot of gaps in knowledge and also lack of ability to think about how to approach certain fight situations the right way to get maximum value out of our fighting units. Now, Eldari don't tend to run very many fighting units. We pretty much have the Howling Banshees in most lists, sometimes Striking Scorpions, and very rarely the Troupe and Troupe Master. But when we have such few fight units, we want to make sure that we're getting the best value out of them that we can. So these techniques are things that you're going to be able to do regardless of whether you take the Troupe and Troupe Master. A lot of these things you can do even with just the Howling Banshees or even Lycus and the Spiders. So definitely take that into consideration when you are listening to these different techniques, because if you apply these, even in games where you don't have the Troupe and Troupe Master, you'll get so much more value out of our fighting units that we do have. And hopefully the other aspect of this that I'm hoping to help with is we'll be more prepared to see what's coming against us from opponents who run melee-oriented armies. So if people have Blood Angels or World Eaters, of course, we're going to be more prepared to see what our opponent is trying to set up and hopefully deny them different techniques that they can use against us by knowing the techniques ourselves. And that is an important part of the knowledge base of this game, is understanding these techniques, not only to use them, but also to defend against them. So for the combat techniques, I want to talk first about staging and how to stage to get maximum value. And that's going to be on the very basic end. And then as we go through, some of these are going to build on each other and they're going to get a bit more complex as we move through these different techniques. And we're going to go from staging to orbiting, and then a slingshot, followed by leapfrogging. And slingshotting, I've heard used for the term that I'm using, leapfrog, but I think there's an interesting differentiation between them, so I wanted to have its own term. So you can slingshot, we have a leapfrog, and then we'll talk about some sacrificial plays for heroic intervention to be able to either block that off on offense and defense, and then do a sacrificial lock. And then finally, we'll talk about combat wrapping. These techniques are all things that you can use, again, with any army, with any detachment, but it's very important to understand how the Troupe and Troupe Master have a bit of an advantage in some of these techniques because of that 6-inch pile-in and consolidate. Now we do have battle focus, so again, you can use a lot of these techniques with Howling Banshees using that 6-inch pylon and consolidate battle focus token as well. Okay, so I have us set up on Tabletop Simulator here just to give us some examples of some different things that we can do and try to show you visually how some of these combat techniques work. So first of all, we're talking about staging. And one of the important distances that we got to consider with this particular combination of the Troupe Master and Troupe is going to be 16 inches. So let me just grab a unit here and we'll place it approximately 16 inches, or within 16 inches is about there. So we'll put them here and get these rangers out of the way for now. And this is an important distance because what it's going to allow us to do is get maximum value out of our troop squad. And the reason is that we get 3 inches outside of the vehicle here. So about like that. So we're going to get 3 inches, and we're going to want all of our fusion pistols to be up front so we can get maximum value out of the fusion pistols, of course. And then the other 3 behind that. So let me zoom in here, get them all. Should be easily within 3 inches of the Starweaver. Now the Troupe have an 8-inch move. So now we can move 8 inches. That puts us right here. And so we are now just outside of the range of our fusion pistols to have Melta. But we can battle focus them an extra 2 inches. And now we can see that with the extra 2 inches, we are now within 3 inches with our fusion pistols, which means they will all get Melta. So if the opponent is up to 16 inches away, we can use a battle focus token to get ourselves in Melta range. If they are 13 inches away, then we will be able to easily get our pistols even without using the 2-inch extra move, which would be important if we need to ignore Overwatch. So make sure that we know we come out 3 inches, we move another 8, so we're at 11 inches. And so we're going to technically be able to get out to 14, but really you want to look around 13 because you have multiple models you're trying to get within that range. So right around 13, 14 inches, we can get to a unit, be in Melta range, and do all that while ignoring Overwatch. So when we give them the 2 inches, they can actually reach out to 16 inches because we go from 14 up to 16. But again, it's kind of between 15 and 16 because you're going to have multiple models, and it's a little safer just to try to make sure that all 3 of them can get in Melta range like this. So that is kind of the special number we're looking for. Now, the other threat range that you want to consider is 19 inches because we can still move out of the transport 3, move 10 by giving ourselves a battle focus token, and the fusion pistols do have a 6-inch range. So we're looking at the 13 inches of movement between coming out of the vehicle and movement, and then a 6-inch range putting us at 19 inches. You won't get the Melta, but you'll still at least be able to shoot all your pistols. So this is kind of how we want to set up our staging. So when our opponent sets up, we want to have our Starweaver in a position where it can reach this whole objective and be within 16 inches. And then we also have this objective over here where we can basically get to the whole thing within 16 inches, except for that last little bit there. And so if the opponent does toe on, they could get outside of our Melta range. But in general, if they're getting on this objective, we're going to be able to send the Troupe into them and they'll be in Melta range. So that is staging. And it's something that we want to make sure that we're taking into consideration when we place our Starweaver. So wherever we do place our Starweaver, it's really nice if we can do so safely to be able to get it in a position where we're within 16 inches of 2 different objectives that our opponent are going to be wanting to stand on in the game. So just keep that in mind when you're using this unit, and that'll help you with your distances and being able to get maximum value out of the damage of the Troupe. Okay, for our next technique, let's talk about orbiting. Now, orbiting is basically the idea of using a unit to allow your models to get more distance than they normally would. And what that's going to allow you to do is maybe get closer to something that you wanted. For example, if the 8 bounds off the objective and we wanted to be on it, we can move towards him, charge, and then as soon as we get to a position where we can't base to base anybody, let's just say we get like this. We also want to be on the objective, and what we can do is if we're worried that we won't actually take out this 8-bound, for example, or whatever this might be, maybe it's a vehicle, we could always just move closer to them. So we can see here we are 4.8 inches away, but we can't base to base. Let's say our charge was to the point where we got like a 6-inch charge or something, and now we can't base to base anywhere. Now we can just move this unit as long as we end closer to them than we started here. We're at 2.4, same with this guy. We move, now we're closer, and we are staying in cohesion, of course, but after we do our fight, we have effectively gotten on the objective while also getting some damage into the unit. So we have orbited them and basically used them as something to go around, and that is the first foundational technique of fighting. So again, we're trying to get some models that can't base to base to move in a direction that's beneficial for us when they can't go base to base, but they're still meeting all the requirements of the charge going towards the unit, but also being able to effectively just kind of go wherever they want, as long as they don't have to base against this particular model. So that is orbiting. So let's talk a little bit about what we can do with orbiting to go into our next technique, which is going to be a slingshot. Okay, for slingshotting, the idea here is we're going to use a unit and orbit them, but then allow us to use them as basically a slingshot to get us into a different unit to either do damage or do something beneficial for us. And we'll talk a little bit about why this is the next step. But let's say in this example, we have the 8-bound here, and after they're shooting, this is what we got. And these guys have moved up, and they've gone there 10 inches. Or let's just say they went 8 because they want to get overwatched. Let's just make it like that. And now we're going to do our charge. And we make the charge, but we also want to tag this Forge Fiend so it will have to either fall back or just shoot at a -1. And it also won't be able to shoot into combat because it does have the blast weapons. So we make the charge, and let's just say we get like a 6-inch charge here. So we'll go something like this here, make sure no one can fit in here to go base to base. Be like this, do the same thing, make sure there's no way to base here, so we have to go around, and looks like we'll base here. And then with these guys, what we can do is move them in a way where they're moving the required distance, say 6 inches. But what we're going to do is try to get it so that the distance from us to that unit is further than the unit we're trying to tag. And so the Forge Fiend, for example, would need to be closer. So we'll move this guy 6 inches as well. So this guy will keep us in cohesion. There we go. Now we are 5.4 and 5.5. So we just need to be just a little bit further back. We could have done 5.7, 5.5. There we go. So this is our charge, and we're in cohesion because we're within 2 inches. Everybody is. And then what we're going to do is when we go to pile in, this guy can go 6 inches for our pile in to the closest enemy model. And the cool thing is that this model is 5.7, this one's 5.5. So the closest enemy model is this, which allows us to tag him 6 inches. And then this guy has to just go closer to the 8-bound. We're at 2.8. And so we'll move to stay in cohesion, and we'll be at 2.4, but we're going to be within 2 inches and 2 inches. So this person here keeps us in cohesion. So what we'll be able to do is do our fight. And let's say we take out this 8-bound, which I think we could do comfortably. And now we're on the objective, and we have also tagged the Forge Fiend. Now the Forge Fiend will get to attack back, but with the Forge Fiend's attacks, it's very unlikely they're going to do a bunch of damage. But even if they did, we could take out maybe one of the troop here. And we probably would want to have had our Troupe Master just touched onto there with some foresight of the Forge Fiend attacking back. But in all reality, it's probably not really going to destroy more than one or so troop. And so now we have this nice situation where we're on the objective, we've taken out a target, but we also tagged the opponent's vehicle. Now that is a slingshot. For this example, I wanted to show going into a fights first unit and how we can use slingshotting to get around it. Now this will be assuming that the unit that we are trying to go into is unable to do a heroic intervention because the opponent, for example, has either already used it or they don't have the CP to be able to do a heroic intervention. But basically what we can do is move our troop. We're going to charge the ranger, and we're going to get ourselves to the same situation where we can't base to base any more models. So let's just say we do something like this. And so now these can't base. We'll have to tighten this up a little bit. Make sure nothing can base to base the ranger now, which we're good. And so it frees up the rest of these models to now get closer to the ranger. We're at 4.5 inches, but also just move closer to these banshees. So we can use this guy, and we're getting closer here, and we just want to keep ourselves in cohesion, of course. We're going to move this guy. We're starting off again, 5.5 inches. We're moving this way, and now we're closer, but now we're 3.9 inches away from the ranger, and we're only 1.3 inches away from Jane Czar. And then this guy will do the same thing, basically like that. And so we have this really nice situation here where we have these models are going to be capable of piling in and going towards Jane Czar. Now, the trick here is to stay in cohesion, but when we finish our charge here, as long as the Howling Banshees don't do a heroic intervention, which of course they could do in this instance, but we're going to assume for this example that they are unable to. When we go to the fight phase, we're going to look and see that the Howling Banshees are not in engagement, and they did not charge this turn. So they can't be selected in the fight's first phase to fight. So it goes to us, and we see that the Harlequins did charge, and so they have fights first. So we're going to select them to fight, and then they will do their pile-ins. Well, they have to pile in to the closest enemy model. Even though we charge the Rangers, we're able to pile in to the Howling Banshees, like so. We're in cohesion, no problem. And then we will do our fight. And the important thing here is that since the Harlequins have been selected to fight already, they will be able to fight. The Howling Banshees cannot interrupt them and do a fight before them just because they have fights first. Once the Harlequins have been selected to fight, they are allowed to do their pile in and then fight and consolidate. They get to do all of that. And then the opponent will get to look and see, okay, what of my fights first units are either in engagement range or have charged, and then they will be able to pick one at that point. But what this effectively allows you to do is get around fights first. So now we'll be able to fight, and we'll easily take out the ranger, and we'd probably take out, let's just say we take out a few banshees. Now, of course, Jane Czar will be able to attack back and would kill a good chunk of these guys, but the point is that we can still get a lot of value by taking out opponents that have fights first, while also taking out another unit, and we're using the slingshot to not allow the Howling Banshees to get their value. Because if we would have just charged and done a dual charge and charged the Ranger and the Howling Banshees at the same time, then at the fight's first step of the fight phase, they would check and see, okay, Jane Czar has somebody in engagement range, she has fights first, your opponent gets to pick who gets to fight first in that phase, and so they would pick Jane Czar, and then she would kill a lot of these guys before they would ever get a chance to fight. But by doing it in this order and using the slingshot method, we actually got around the fights first, allowed our Harlequins to do the damage they needed, including to the fights first unit, and then the opponent would get to fight back. And so it is a very useful technique in certain circumstances when the opponent has a deadly fights first unit and you're trying to, in a sense, avoid taking the brunt of the damage from that unit. And you're going to use something that's nearby, whether this ranger's back here or here, use it as the charge target so that you can get into that unit, but then also get your models closer But outside of 1 inch specifically, you have to stay outside of 1 inch if you didn't charge that unit. So you're staying outside of 1 inch, and then when you do the pile in, you are piling into them, which again gets past their fight's first ability. I hope that helps explain slingshotting and just a couple of the examples here and how to use it and some of the value you can get out of it. It's a very powerful technique. A lot of players who use combat armies will use this against you, so make sure that you know that if you put a unit near a fight's first unit, like the Howling Banshees, you don't want this happening to you. You don't want the opponent, whether it's they're playing World Eaters and they do it with their Berserkers, you don't want them to charge the Rangers but then put a whole bunch of Berserkers into your Howling Banshees and get around your fights first. So make sure we're keeping our Rangers plenty far away. And yes, you are going to miss out on the Heroic Intervention, but if you don't have the CP for Heroic Intervention, then you're better off just staying split. And if you do have Heroic Intervention, however, that is of course the counter, because when they go to do that, you heroically intervene, and that does put you now in engagement, which means that you get to fight. And since the Banshees have fights first, they would get to fights first. So make sure if you see your opponent setting up a slingshot like this and you have the ability to do Heroic Intervention, that you use it, or else you're going to take a lot of pain to your fight's first unit in that fight phase. So I hope that explains it. Let me know in the comments if you still have questions about the slingshot, but let's go ahead and take a look at a Leapfrog. Okay, for the Leapfrog, we're going to actually use a combination of 2 units, and we're going to use a unit to take out an opponent's unit that will then propel one of our other units to go further and touch another unit to fight as well. And that sounds kind of convoluted, but let's just say in this example, we wanted the troop to be able to go into the 8-bound, for example, and the opponent has something like this set up, and maybe the 8-bound are actually a little further up here, and these guys are a little bit screened. So our troop, they move their 10 inches like this, and the charge is just going to be really long. Let's just say they have like a 9 or so inch charge, and it's really dangerous for them to charge because they could very easily fail that charge. Now, what we're going to do is move up some Howling Banshees. Let's say they move up. And now we have this situation where we have 2 nice, strong fighting units able to try to deal with this situation at the same time. Now, the Howling Banshees also have a long charge, and the troop have a long charge into these 8-bound. So it's going to be at least 9 inches. And a 9-inch charge is not great odds. Even if you have a CP for a reroll, you're looking at around a 50% or just over 50% chance of making it. So instead of taking that risk, what we can do is the Leapfrog technique. So we're going to charge the Howling Banshees first and charge them into these Berserkers. And then on top of that, we're going to charge the troop into the Berserkers as well. And we're going to try to get them into something like this, where they all charge. And let's just say they got a pretty good long charge here, and we're going to get them all like that. Oops. Something along these lines. So once we finish the charge phase here, we're going to fight with the Howling Banshees first, and we'll just say that they take out all the Berserkers, because there's about 5. That's completely reasonable between Janzar and them. And then that means that our troop here have not fought yet. But since they charged, they can still be selected to fight. So we're going to select them to fight, and then we're going to use their 6-inch pile and consolidate to move up to 6 inches. So we move, we move, we move, and then we're going to base to base to base with as many as we can. And we might be able to get all of them. Okay, all but 1. So we got, let's say that guy died too. So all the Berserkers would have to most likely have been killed. And now we can see here we have the Troupe Master is in, lead player, and then all these troop except for this one are actually now able to fight into the 8-bound. And again, this was a charge that they pretty much would have been at a high risk of making, like not making, I'm sorry. But that Berserker charge was basically guaranteed. So we took a guaranteed charge to allow ourselves to get into a unit that would have been very difficult for us to actually make a charge into. And I've even had instances where I've been able to charge and get to a unit that I legally was not even able to declare because it was over 12 inches away, but I charged the Harlequins, for example, into a unit that was closer, charged the Howling Banshees in, and then did the pile in with the troop, and they actually covered more than that 12 inches to be able to actually get into that unit. So you can actually use the Leapfrog to get further charges than you normally would even be allowed to be able to do. So it's a very powerful technique to understand, not only, again, for ourselves, but to watch out for our opponent using the same technique. The other thing about this technique is it does allow us to get around fights first again, because even if these 8 bound, let's say they're something that has fights first, doesn't really matter what it is, but if they have fights first, because our troop are back here and the 8 bound have nothing with an engagement range and they did not charge this turn, that means that our troop are selected, they start their fighting, which means they get to pile in, and then they fight and will consolidate and do all that before this unit gets to do anything. So it is another method, and really a more powerful one in a lot of ways, because you can generally get more of your models into that fight. It's a great method for actually getting around fights first. And so it's, again, just a cautionary tale for us that if we have the Howling Banshees hiding somewhere, we got to be really careful that the opponent doesn't do the same thing to us. Like in this example, maybe destroying the Starweaver with one unit and then piling into our Banshees with a different unit, which would get around the Banshees fights first. So leapfrogging, like I said, I feel like is a little different than a slingshot, because a slingshot can be done even with just one unit, like the Harlequins themselves. But the leapfrog will require 2 units, and you're basically, the Harlequins are hopping over the backs of the Banshees to be able to get into a unit that they generally would not have been able to reach. So really cool technique, very powerful, gets around fights first, and allows you to actually get further charges than you normally would actually be able to do in some circumstances. So very nice technique. One thing that I want to point out here too is that the Troupe Master was able to come up all the way here to this 8 bound because we have that Choreographer of War, and he doesn't have to go to the closest enemy model, just the closest enemy unit. And so he didn't have to pile into the 8 bound here, which allowed us to get more of our troop squad into this unit. So this is one of those niche cases where the 6-inch pile in and consolidate on top of being able to move closer to the closest enemy unit as opposed to just model actually helps us get more models in the fight and can make a big difference in the amount of damage that we do. Like I said, it's kind of rare, and it's a pretty niche extra addition to that ability. But in some circumstances like this here, because the Troupe Master was able to move up and out of the way and allow another troop to actually get base to base here, and then these ones are able to base to base to base, it actually allowed us to get probably one more troop into this fight than we normally would have if we had to just go to the closest enemy model. So a pretty nice little extra bonus that you get with the Troupe Master that can sometimes make the difference between you getting in another troop or so into that fight. And of course, there's other small places where that ability can be used, but I want to stay focused on the main techniques here that you're going to be able to use with most every unit. So now that we've kind of looked at leapfrogging and slingshotting, orbiting, and we understand staging, we're going to go into some of the other advanced techniques as well. But one last thing before we do, I just want to mention that, let's say, for example, you have a rhino. This idea can also be applied in a sense to a transport where you have something come in, fight the transport, it blows up, something comes out, and then we are able to 6-inch pile and consolidate our troop into the unit that came out, even if they came out on the other side of the transport. So really nice to have 6-inch pile and consolidate on the troop, especially when going against things coming out of transports. So just a few things to keep in mind. And with that, I'll set up our situation for our sacrificial techniques that we'll be going into with this unit. Okay, so for our first sacrificial technique, we're going to talk about using the Troupe Master and Troop with the Starweaver as a combination package to deal with certain circumstances and situations. The first one is going to be stopping the opponent's heroic intervention. So let's say we want to get into these Khorne Berserkers, and we move our troop, our 10 inches, so they can get all their shooting off and pistols and shooting. They shoot some of them. They're down to just these 5 or so guys. But what we don't want is to charge in and then they heroic the 8-bound and then we kill 1 unit, but then they get to kill our Harlequin back. Or in a worst case scenario, maybe this unit has fights first and we just really can't afford to let them heroically intervene and kill our troop before the troop get to do their damage. So that's where the Star Weaver comes in. A lot of times the Star Weaver is going to be coming along as well to get the troop back inside of it. So the Star Weaver can be moving up, and we can even give it the extra inches of movement with our d6+1, and let's say get it somewhere like up here. I won't twist it here. Something like this. So now the Star Weaver has moved its way up. It's now close within 6 inches. We'll be able to get the troop back into it. But importantly, what we're going to use the Star Weaver for is basically a sacrifice against this fights first unit or whatever unit we don't want to heroically intervene into our troop. So the order is going to be important here. What we need to do before we charge the troop and allow the heroic intervention, we need to charge our Star Weaver in, and basically that will block the heroic intervention, because now that this unit is tagged in an engagement, they're not allowed to be selected for heroic intervention. Now we can safely charge our troop squad into the berserkers, which means that yes, we will probably be able to take out the berserkers, but the Star Weaver, of course, maybe it does tank shock and maybe we get lucky and we take out an 8-bound or something, but in all likelihood, we're not doing much to the 8-bound. But if this was fights first unit, whatever it might be, of course, they very well probably destroy the Star Weaver, but importantly, they do not get to put their attacks into this unit. Now, this unit is 160 points and the Star Weaver is 80, so we're much happier to lose our 80-point unit than we are our 160-point package unit there. So just something to keep in mind, that if we can keep our troop safe and are able to charge into something and do damage into a target we really need to take out, and we can use the Star Weaver basically as a sacrificial block, that is extremely helpful in protecting our troop squad. Now on the flip side, we can actually use the Star Weaver again as basically a defensive block. So let's say for whatever reason, the troop are sitting here, maybe there was a berserker, and the berserker falls back. Now, when that normally happens, you can actually do a normal move with the troop with fade back and actually go back into the Star Weaver anyways. Okay, for the next situation, we'll be talking about the Sacrificial lock. The Sacrificial lock is really kind of using some of the ideas that we actually kind of saw with the Star Weaver sacrificing itself with that heroic intervention, but we're going to do it more offensively and not have to use heroic intervention to do so. So let's say we have this situation here where we have all these berserkers and they're led by Master of Executions, and we're really concerned about that Master of Executions getting into our troop and Troupe Master and all that. We really would rather him not be able to fight against our troop. Now, that can be kind of difficult because if we just send our troop in, of course, then we'll kill, 5, 6, whatever it might be, berserkers. And then, of course, when we go to let them hit us back, they can possibly do a ton of damage into our troop unit here. Okay, so we have our troop and Troupe Master, and they're going to move their 10 inches. We're not worried about Overwatch here. We're going to stay outside of an inch, so we have to move him back just a little bit, move these guys back. But we have moved up this way, and then we're also going to move up. Again, our Star Weaver is going to come out and move up this way and get nice and close so we can't fail the charge. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to charge the troop into the berserkers. Now, ideally, what you could do is move these guys back a little bit and actually try to get the Star Weaver in first to try to block off a lot of the base to basing requirements that you would have, which is probably a good idea in this case because we really want to try to keep ourselves safe from this Master of Executions. So the troop, let's say they moved up, we make the charge. What we're going to try to do is base to base with things that can. So let's say we make like a pretty good charge, like an, 8-inch charge, something like that. And we're sitting like this. Now the Troupe Master is not going to be able to base to base. This is important. But we are going to send him up 8 inches. And you might have to go around a little bit. And then this Troupe is going to come up as well. And we're going to try to get as many as we can into this direction. And actually, we could probably move this guy a little bit because we can't fit the Troupe Master in there either. So we're going to try to stay as far this direction as we can. Now we have base to base with the Master of Execution, so he's not going to be able to move. We've tried to get our Starweaver as close to as many of the enemy models as we can with this charge. Now what we're going to do is when we go to fight, we can pile in. And so with our pile in, we're going to move the Troupe Master in, and we're going to get everybody base to base as far away basically as we can to as many of the models as we're able. And when we fight and we take out, let's just say we take out a good chunk of these guys between the shooting and pistols and fighting and all that kind of stuff, then we're not going to consolidate with the troop. We can then allow the opponent, he'll do his pile in, and if we had this correctly base to base, so these two guys won't be able to move. This guy will. He could pile in his 3 inches and they may be able to get one guy in. And if this guy could base to base, they might be able to get 2. And there's not really much we can do about that. But as you can see, what we did is we at least kept Master Executions and as many as we could out of engagement range or the capacity to be able to fight our players. And so that means he will be able to get a few in, and let's say he does take out some of our players, probably these ones. Let's say he takes out, I don't know, 3 or 4, but because the Master of Executions and all these guys were unable to fight into his unit, then we were able to keep him safe. Now, Master of Executions can see him, but because he's not able to fight into that unit, he cannot target him because it's not a viable unit for him to fight against. So the Troupe Master would be safe, couldn't be precisioned out by the Master of Executions, and we still have our lead player, so we're still going to have some things left over. Whereas if we would have just charged the Troupe Master and Troupe in, then they would have easily been destroyed on the hit back from the Berserkers and the Master of Executions. So now they will probably destroy the Starweaver, but we have kept our damaging units still alive, and the opponent will now have to still deal with them as opposed to just a Starweaver and having killed the entire troop squad. Now, on the consolidation side, of course, if there was another unit here or maybe back here, we could always try to use that to try to, if possible, before he did his pile in. We might even be able to consolidate back into a vehicle or something. So just also keep that kind of stuff in mind. But this can help in a lot of situations where we're going to sacrifice our Starweaver on a charge to tie up as many of the opponent's models as possible so that after we fight, they cannot put much in the hit back into our troop and Troupe Master squad. So it's kind of like the heroic intervention sacrifice, but this is more offensive and we're just using a regular charge, so we don't have to spend CP for heroic. So it ends up working out really well. So that's basically the main techniques that I wanted to cover that I feel like everybody should know and have at least some sort of understanding in. There's one more that's a little bit more niche for us because we tend not to take too many units where wrapping is that important, but I did want to at least talk about it so you can see what people, again, may try to do against us and we can do in certain circumstances. So let's take a look at a combat wrap. So to pull off a combat wrap, and like in this circumstance, we're basically going to try to surround this rhino so he can't let the guys inside out if we're not expecting to actually be able to destroy this rhino, which in melee, honestly, we actually have a decent chance. But let's just say we're concerned about what might pop out on our opponent's turn, and we want to stop them from doing so, at least without taking severe penalties. So what we can do is when we charge, we're going to charge our players into base. The closest ones are going to go where they can, and we're basically going to try to block off any other basing that would be required. So something like this, and try to make it so that one can't fit in here. So we're going to slightly move him so that this guy cannot. And then now that these guys are unable to base, we are going to look at our range here, and 3 inches away from the rhino, I guess this guy will have to back up a little bit, but 3 inches away from this rhino, he can't really put a model wholly within 3 and not be within an inch of this troop. So even like this, he's 3 point, yeah, right there, he's going to be in engagement range of the troop. So that's kind of what we're looking to do, is stop him from being able to drop guys out of the Rhino. So now that we have these 3 troops set up the best we can, that means that these players can then move this direction. And we're going to want to have a guy keep us in cohesion. So we are moving closer to the Rhino, but these guys are then going to do their charge. And again, what we're going to do here is actually a weird move where when we make the charge, let's see, if we're 7.3, we're going to try to get ourselves to where we're 6.1 inches away. 6.4, 6.2, okay. And then this guy's also going to do the same kind of charge. Let's say whatever it was. And we just want to be outside of 6 is the important part here. So we will charge like this, but we are closer because we started like 7 something away. Now we are closer, but we actually moved up this direction. And the reason is because we want to finish our wrap, because normally if we just went in, he could still drop the units in the back, and we want to cut off that back. So what we're going to do on our pile-in is we're going to use the advantage of our 6-inch pile-in and consolidate. We're going to do our 6-inch pile-in. These guys are going to come in 6 inches as well. But importantly, they're not going to be able to be base to base. So they will get their 6 inches like so. Not base to base, but still able to fight. We'll fight with all of them, and then if the Rhino doesn't die, we're going to do our 6-inch consolidate. Now these 2 are not base to base, so they are able to do a 6-inch pile and consolidate. So this guy will do his 6 inches this way, and again, we're going to check our measurements here and just basically get base to base so that he can't bring anything out within 3 inches without being engagement of our player. And it's not letting me get any closer, but base to base, and then the Troupe Master will fill in the other gap. So now we've effectively wrapped the Rhino, and he cannot drop out what's inside without being within engagement range. So there's no way for him to do so without, great penalties. Or if we destroy the Rhino, the Rhino to fall back would have to go through models, which means that he has to take a desperate escape, etc., etc. So combat wrapping can cause a lot of problems for the opponent, where they're not able to get the use out of what's inside transports, or the transport's kind of stuck. And so that is how you can do an effective combat wrap. Now, as you can see, we're using the board edge to help us because the troop squad is such a small unit that it's kind of hard to wrap. They will charge us and do something more like this, where all their berserkers are able to wrap us, and so now we're in that problem situation, but they have so many more models with their 10 and 20 man bricks that we just can't stop, in a sense, that wrapping, and they'll wrap us. So know it's something that your opponent can also do, and it is kind of a problem. Now, of course, our Starweaver can fly, so it's a little bit less of an issue for him. But importantly, though, the troop can't get out in this situation without being within engagement range. So it can cause some problems. So just watch out for combat wrapping. There's some circumstances where we can use it. People who are using Janzar and like 10 Howling Banshees, you could do some wrapping. But I just wanted to kind of explain the technique. I wanted to show how it could be done and how you set up that weird situation where you're actually charging further away so that when you pile in, you're still outside of base to base, but you are with an engagement, and then when you consolidate, you can finalize the wrap. And so it's kind of a weird technique to actually get the full value out of it, but it's an important one to understand and know, and it is the last one that we'll be talking about when it comes to combat techniques. So now that we're done with all the visual examples of the combat techniques, let's get back to the slides and go into review. So in review, quickly, the Harlequin troop fight well into most all targets. Their built-in abilities allow them to do damage and are dangerous in almost any situation against any target. However, understanding the different combat techniques that we have access to is essential for maximizing the troop. The troop is a very flexible unit, and that 6-inch pile and consolidate gives it access to a lot of the really cool combat techniques that we just covered. It's important for us to understand our opponent's threat as well. So these combat techniques are important to understand so we can see how our opponent can also do these against us. Now, I will say the troop are not easy to use. Make sure you're patient with yourself as you learn. Once you are able to wield them efficiently, you'll have improved your ability to fight in melee-oriented opponents. You'll really have helped your own understanding of some of the techniques and the technical aspects of the fight phase of the game, which will just improve you as a player. And once you use the troupe, you will actually have used some of these techniques and have a better understanding of them, so that when your opponent is trying to do something, you'll either see it or hopefully be able to set yourself up in a way where you can defend against some of these things, and that will improve your likelihood of winning games, especially when going in to melee-oriented armies. One thing I didn't really talk too much about is really the Star Weaver and the troupe getting back in. Obviously, you can take a lot of these techniques and abilities that they can do with taking out units. As long as they're not in engagement range, they can go back in the Star Weaver. And if the opponent falls back from them, they can make a move and go back into the Star Weaver. If the opponent shoots them, they can go back into the Star Weaver. There's a lot of circumstances where the troupe and Troupe Master are able to get themselves back into the Star Weaver. And another important thing to know is that it's not only at the end of your fight phase, it's also at the end of your opponent's fight phase. So if the troupe and Troupe Master are outside of the Star Weaver and the opponent falls back and you don't have battle focus tokens, for example, to be able to move them into the Star Weaver, then just at the end of the fight phase, if the trooper's still there and wholly within 6 inches, they get back in the Star Weaver anyways. So the Star Weaver's ability is actually really nice and gives a lot of flexibility to the troupe and Troupe Master. And just the whole package together has a lot of really cool synergies that I hope I've been able to show you in this video. So definitely let me know if you have any questions, and let me know if you learned anything new, or if these techniques are something you didn't even really know were possible in the game. But a lot of these techniques are going to help move you from a beginner player and even an intermediate player into a more well-rounded player that has a good understanding of the mechanics of the game to be able to improve your chances of winning games. So I hope this helps you guys. Let me know if it did. This is a video that I did and wanted to kind of put out there because we have gotten over 1,000 subscribers. I'm really appreciative of everybody that has subscribed. If you are watching this and you learned something new or felt like the channel in general has helped you in any way, I would greatly appreciate anyone who subscribes and likes and shares. It just helps the channel, and I will continue to try to make more content as things move forward. I know as of late I have not put out content in a little while. I've had a lot of personal things that have been going on in life, as far as some situations with family and kids, and also some extended family, and it just was not able to be done. So I apologize to you for not having more content put out recently, but I'm hoping to get back on track, and I'm going to be shooting for those 2 videos a month as a general target to shoot for, and maybe even put out more than that. But I did want to put out a video that I hope really helps you and has a lot of good content in it for waiting, for one thing, and then also as we hit that 1,000 subscribers, I thought it'd be nice to put out kind of a special video that really dives deep and hopefully helps some of you Eldari players out there with using the troupe and Troupe Master and have fun while doing it. This unit is one of my favorites in the game. It's a lot of fun to use. It's very difficult to use, but hopefully throughout this video you've kind of seen that there's just so much that they can do, and if you know the techniques in the game, there's so many things that you can pull off. And when you pull them off, and it really kind of shows your skill with these techniques. So I'm excited to hear from people what they think about these techniques, and if you've used them, definitely give me some examples in the comments. I love hearing about how people have used them. And if coaching is something that interests you, if you'd like to learn more in person and kind of in detail how some of these things work, and of course I couldn't go over everything, but I wanted to try to make this video pretty comprehensive, but there's always little things that you can go into more detail with, of course. Let me know. Check out the website and just send me a message, and you'll get a reply that will have 5 common mistakes that Eldari players make, a little PDF, and then also give you the information on how I do coaching. If that interests you at all, check out that website. And if you also just want to support the channel, of course, liking and subscribing is greatly appreciated. But if Patreon is something that interests you, I also have a Patreon in the description below. Thank you to those who do support through Patreon. Thank you to all those that I've been coaching and teaching, because without you, I would not have been able to come up with so many different ideas for videos, and I wouldn't have had as much of a good idea of what even to put in the content of these videos. So thank you to my current and past students, and I look forward to getting more content out for you guys in the future. we will talk to you in the next one.